So we now have the basics set up within SalesPad Cloud. We are now ready to go start looking at one additional piece, and that's if you need to support multiple locations. So in Cloud, we do have the ability to support one or more locations within your company. And so those locations can be true physical locations. They can be segmented into different warehouses within your facility or different areas within your facility. You can break that down as granular as you would like. Location, though, again, similar to the unit of measure setup, we have locations on the left-hand side. We do also support multi-bin environments. So again, I can have within a location, I can split that location up into one or more bins that allow me to get even more specific with how I'm storing my inventory within my warehouse or within my location. Bins are not required. You do not have to use those. It does, anytime you start using bins, it does add an additional level of complexity to every transaction that affects inventory. So going back to the sales document setup where we specified the manual fulfillment or auto fulfillment, if I have a location that has multiple bins, when I go to do my manual fulfillment, I now not only have to specify, again, let's say we're using serial lots, not only my serial or lot controlled item, but now I also have to specify the bin that inventory is coming out of. For inventory receipts or inventory adjustments, inventory transfers, all of those transactions would then require you to specify a from bin and a to bin, or if you're doing transfers, or an in or out, the bin that you're transferring in or adjusting in, or the bin that you're adjusting out. And then on the receiving side, the bin that you are receiving inventory into. So again, adding those bins, it does give you much better visibility and traceability within your locations, but it does add that additional layer of complexity to every transaction that affects your inventory items. Locations are typically created, or we will pull locations over from QuickBooks Online because you can turn on the multi-location support or location support within QuickBooks. If you set up locations in QuickBooks, we will then integrate those over to Cloud. And then at that point, if you do choose to use multiple bins, you could then set up bins within SalesPad Cloud at that point. So I do have, per location, the ability to set multiple addresses or an address per location. This is important that you set that address. If you are going to be purchasing and having that PO go to one of these locations, the address that is used on the purchase order printed form is coming from this location address. So it's important that you specify or that you fill that address information in. So I do have the ability to, when I create my new locations, I can name this, so we'll name this Warehouse 2. I can give it a company name if it needs to be different. And again, these are additional values that you can print on any of the printed forms that are looking at the location address. We do have the ability to replenish or specify what location this is being replenished from. So if you're doing replenishment through sales transfers as opposed to purchasing, you could specify that Warehouse 2 is replenished by the main warehouse or by the Lowell warehouse. And then there's some things that we will do for around demand planning and some of those other items where we would be able to build transfer orders based off of the replenishment location. Currently, we're not really using that other than just for reporting. I will mention too, while we're staying on the setup screen, you'll notice this main warehouse and it looks different as far as the setup. It's all caps. That is the default warehouse. So whenever you create a new company within SalesPad Cloud, we do default in a main warehouse and name it main. You can always go back and mark that as inactive, and then it won't be used if you wanted to set up your own named warehouses. I can specify that this is primary. When I specify that a location is primary, I can only have one primary location. So if I were to check this, you'll notice in the background, Lowell Warehouse is marked as primary now. If I were to set this new Warehouse 2 as primary, it would uncheck Lowell Warehouse as primary. So this is going to override any other primary location that's set. that means that this item is what, or this location is what is going to default on any transaction when I go to create it. I also have my contact information, so I can specify that this is again filling out this contact address. I can put a contact name, so if this was going to be, they needed to get in touch with me, anything that came here, we'll make this some address. And then we'll save that. And so we now have this new contact, or this new warehouse with addresses. And again, at this point, I could go in and start creating bins within that location. Now, bins are specific to the location, just like we had talked about unit of measure, types and unit of measures. The left-hand column, the location column, is the parent. Bins are then specific to whatever selection I've made on the left-hand side. So we can call this A1. So this is row A1, A1. So row A1, bin A1. We'll save that, and then I can start adding multiple bins. Now, we do have a bin generation functionality that will be added in shortly to where you can auto-generate bins. So you would be able to specify the number of rows, the number of columns in your warehouse, and the number of bins within those columns. And then we'll auto-gen bins for you. And then anything that you need to go fill in the gaps for, you can create additional bins to fill that gap in or mark some as inactive. So I have my bins defined. Again, bins are not required. Once you have defined a bin within a location, we are going to assume that every transaction then within that location is going to require a bin. And so once you have added, and once you have an active bin within the location, you are now essentially using multi-bin within that location. So again, I can always go back and mark it as inactive. That's going to take care of it for me, but just be aware that as you start adding, if you decide to start adding bins, it becomes very difficult then to go back and not use bins after that. If I have already started adding inventory both at the location level, and then if I have multi-bin, if I start using it at the bin level, I cannot inactivate a location or mark a location as inactive if it has inventory in that location. I also cannot mark a bin as inactive if it has inventory within that bin. So again, just some additional things to be aware of as you're setting up and then maintaining your bins in your locations.